Hi there, this is Linda D'Antonio from Seaporium, located on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Thank you for spending some time with us today. We're going to explain to you how to do the beechwood planking on a wall, in particular on our wall at home. We're using a little accent wall here on our stairwell, and it's going to be a nice little fun feature. It's not a very large wall because it's not a very large space. But it's nice to add just a little spunk, and we do love the whole beach house theme here. If you're ever in the area, please come down to Main Street in Hyannis where our shop is. If not, you can shop all our products at Seaporium.com. There's also a bunch of helpful information. If you're interested in Iron Orchid Designs products like we'll be using today for the stamps, they're all available, as well as Dixie Belle paints, silk mineral paints, and bells and whistles lines of DIY, papers, stencils, and things like that. So let me get you up to date where we're at right now. If you're interested in how to paint a wall, there's plenty of videos on how to paint your wall. What we did is we filled in holes. We taped around all the important structures. We already painted our base molding and trim. We taped around all the hardware. In particular, I don't want to take this off. For some reason, the thermostat covers, if you mess with it and it's not level, you can have problems. And it's not something that I mind taping around this. Normally, it's usually pretty easy to take off, and as long as your mounting is level, it shouldn't be a problem. We left our alarm horn in place because I just don't want to mess with that because that's so loud. And outlets, you want to take the switch plate covers off and things like that. I don't like to put tape over everything because you have more of a possibility of touching the live wires on the sides. So I just try to be careful with a trim brush and go around there. So we trimmed the wall, or we washed the wall, I should say, after we did all our prep. If you're ever painting walls, don't forget, like with your furniture, it's important to clean your surface. Back in the day, there was fall and spring cleaning. People actually washed the walls and probably the ceilings too. But people don't seem to do that anymore. If you're painting your walls, it's quite important that you do wash your walls. After so many years, you're building up dust. You're building up, in this particular, it's a great room. We cook right over there. There's going to be grease in the air that's going to settle on your walls. If you're just going to paint them, you could risk it and just leave it, because all you're going to do is maybe put a nail in, and it won't affect anything. But we're going to be taping. If I was plastering over this, it would be extremely important that everything was prepped well, because just like with furniture, if there's any grime, dust, or anything like that, and it's not going to stick. So I like to use a TSP according to directions. Wash the wall, rinse it off, let it dry, and then if you need primer, you want to go ahead and do that. And you want to work with your retailer where you buy your paint to determine for sure if you need to prime. If it's a brand new wall, new construction, it's a skim coat, whatever, you're going to want to use a specific primer for that open plaster. Then you can use whatever paint you want over that. If you have a higher sheen and you're going to a lower sheen, the highest sheen would be a gloss, semi-gloss, satin or pearl, eggshell, down to like a flat or a matte. If you're going from any of the highers down to the lower, you're going to want to have at least a primer in your paint. I'm going over flat or matte over matte, however we're calling it, depending on your manufacturer. I don't have to prime, but I do believe there was actually primer in the paint. It actually took 4 coats because we did have about 8-inch stripes on this wall, and it was white and like a seafoam green, aqua, like more of a bluey part of maybe more blue than green, whatever. And believe it or not, as light as it was, it took 4 coats of the latex to cover, which is another reason why I love chalk style paints when I'm working with furniture. It just covers so much better than latex. So we let that all dry, and we're ready to, I've already started marking the walls. And what I did was I used this level, and I had already plotted out. I had taken, let me show you what we're working with actually. Let me not get ahead of myself. We're working with this stamp. All right, let me see my view here. And see, that's all the loveliness you get, all these different textures of the stamp. And this is an effect that you can get using this stamp. All right, we're going to add a little more texture to that than what you see here. When you first get the stamps, if you're not familiar with this, they'll come on a full sheet. I didn't bring any home with me. There's a 12 by 12 sheet, and they can peel off of the sheets. When you open it up, there's a sheet on top of these, the 12 by 12s, and you peel that off, and then let's say this is a 12 by 12 sheet. You get a fine grit sandpaper, like a 220, 180 maybe, and sand the whole sheet one way, the other way, and then you clean it off, damp rag or whatever, let it dry. That's the only time you need to do it. Then the sheet that the stamps are on, you could peel these off, but they're going to be very flimsy. And I'm never going to make an arrangement with these, okay? I'm never going to take this and maybe put this on another one and make it a bigger stamp, which you can do with Iron Orchid designs. You can take different flowers, peel them off of their carrier sheets, make an arrangement and catch it with that clear sheet you took off of the front of these and make it a larger stamp. But that's a project for another day. All I did in this particular case is I left the stamps on their carrier sheet and cut all around that backing or carrier sheet. So now I have a little bit firmer of a stamp to work with, and there's many different patterns. There's the long straight grain of the oak. This is our most important one. I'll explain that in a minute. We have a fine grain oak. We have the open grain oak. All right. You get a couple different joints. You get a couple different knots. All right, there's just a bunch of different options for this. So let me explain. I've marked my wall according to this particular one right here. This is a well-loved stamp, by the way, you guys. I did my 40-foot wall. I think it's actually longer than that at the store. So if you see stage pictures of a white wall with the shiplap, you will see this stamp on a kind of a white shiplap look. It's a stamp, okay? It's not actual shiplap. But this right here to this right here, the actual raised areas of this stamp, all right? That is the important part. If you measure them from the middle of the line to the middle of the line, and it's going to vary slightly. I just took an average point, and from the middle of that raised stamp line to the middle of this lower seam stamp line is roughly 4 9/16, a hair over 4.5 inches. All right, so I made tick marks and I found my happy medium. And actually all I did was I measured the 4.5 down, which will show you, you don't have to, we're not going to shove that into the actual wall, up into the ceiling. And then I made tick marks all the way down, and it actually worked out that I only have 3.5 inches from the base molding. So I'm happy with that. But if I had a 1/2 inch down there, I want to arrange my tick marks for my layout of the horizontal planking a little differently, so I didn't have such a small little plank left at the bottom or the top. So once you get over that and you know how many rows you're going to have and where those rows are going to be, then you want to get a level. All right. And this is an old school way of doing it. Let me get my little pencil, which I had somewhere. Oh, it's over there. I use a watercolor pencil, and you can use chalk. First of all, chalk is going to be real thick, and it's going to change the thickness every time you use it. It's going to get fatter and fatter. And it also, remember we talked about having residue on your walls, grime, dust, dirt, things like that? chalk is a powder. And so I find it adds a resist to your walls. So if you're trying to make a nice straight line and you're going to tape over that, you're going to want to tape over it or just under it and then wipe it off after, before you paint. Or you use a watercolor pencil, which you'll see these lines were done. It's actually a black, but you can get a plethora of different colors. I would probably do like a light aqua so it didn't stand out so different. But I don't have one handy and I didn't want to run to the store. The nice thing about the watercolor pencil is not only is it doesn't leave a residue, but if I don't like it, it washes off because it's watercolor. All right. So once I had my tick marks, you put the level line at the tick mark, your level at the tick mark, right? Leaving yourself room for your pencil. And then if you've never used these before, there's a little bubble inside those vials. And on either end of the vial, there's black lines. And you just want to make sure that that bubble is exactly in the middle of the two black lines. And then you mark off your level line. However, if it's not 100% in the middle, that'll give you a really nice level look. But I do prefer this laser level. And this one's a little funky. Doesn't always like to cooperate. There we go. There's a little center hole in here. If I wanted to, I could use a thin brad nail and nail this right into the line that I'm using as my hashtags, and I could mark my whole wall this way. But if you'll notice, as I get to this end, it's not on my level line here anymore. I tend to believe that it's because my old school version of a level is not exactly perfect. Because maybe if I wasn't dead on with looking at the bubble inside the lines, it might not have been exactly center. Or maybe my pencil went in different directions as I went down the line on the level. So this is my preferred method, but this would be fine. No one would see the difference, okay? So that's where we're at. We have everything protected. We have tarps down. We have tape all around our hardware. We've taken our switch plate covers off. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to continue marking my wall, all my horizontal lines. I'm going to mark off roughly 8 feet, because if you got wood, and you don't have to go to this measure. This is just me being me. But runs of wood will be, 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet, I think. So I'm going to measure out maybe 8 feet. And I'm going to stagger my joints. So let's say, I don't even know if I have 8 feet here, actually. We're going to have to maybe rethink that. Maybe we'll make one whole one. And then we're going to maybe put a joint over here, a joint over here, and then a joint over here, so that it'd be like if you actually had someone install shiplap or this beach plank look in your walls. All right, and I'll see you at the next clip. So here we are. Everything is marked off. I started taping off my squares. There's two different ways you can do this. You could tape off one whole row, and I'm choosing 4 colors. You could do 5 colors, 6 colors. I think doing an odd number helps make your pattern more random. So I'm going to do, I currently have it marked for 4, but I'm rethinking this out. I don't want too much dark gray. I'm going with a white, aqua, tan, dark gray, and light gray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to alternate my dark gray and light gray, and the dark gray and a green, I mean. So I'm going to keep the light gray because I don't want things to get too dark in here. And I don't want, too much gray. I don't want too much green. So I'm going to alternate my dark grays with my green. That way I'll have some of the darker gray. I'll have a little pop of another color, but not too much. I don't want it to be too happy. I don't want it to be too dark. That's my train of thought. You do what you want to do. So you could do the whole row. I have white, and I've marked it so I don't get confused. And you want to make sure that you're taping off with a low tack tape, because we just painted this wall. And I'm not going to put the paint on very heavy, but we want to make sure we mark it off so we stay with our pattern and it's all thought out, and I know that the colors aren't together. So white, aqua. I have tan, light gray, dark gray. Then I have, again, white. But see, now I have the white over there. I didn't want to put the white here. So even though I'm alternating, I am also kind of making sure that they're not in perfect rows with all my whites, all my tans, all my, you know. So that's what we're doing. I marked all that off. And I have decided, instead of doing like a white and the aqua, and then, you know, paint the white, right? Well, you could say, well, I already have white, but you'll see. You'll see. I'm going to add a little pizzazz to the white. I could let the white dry and then do the aqua. It's going to take a lot longer, I think, in the long run, where here I have marked off all my whites, and I'm going to do all my whites. As long as you have enough color variance in your wall, and it's helping that my wall is not very large, I can do just my whites. You might have to, if it's a large project, a long wall, you might not be able to do it as compactly as I have, but it just worked out that none of my colors are gonna butt each other up in consecutive rows. And that's an important thing, because when we mark this off, we want this full row, but now this row isn't full. So when we tape this off, we can only paint the areas that are the full plank. I hope that makes sense. This, if I tried to paint that, the line starts here, not there. And then it goes up to there. So I can paint in here, but I don't want to paint in there right now. I have to move my tape down to the other part of the line when that paint is dry. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, you can leave your comments down below. I will be sure to get to them. So that's what I'm going to do, and we'll see you at the next clip. All right, here we go. I have a palette. I actually thought I was videotaping and my camera totally moved, so we're redoing this section. You'll see we already have some paint on here. It looks a little wet. I'm going to explain. You're probably not seeing a big difference, but I'm going to explain. We have a palette. I have white, which is my base coat. I have a gray, which is what we're going to use for our dark gray. I have a tan, which is what we're going to use for our tan. So everything's going to be cohesive with the whole design. We're going to add shadows using the same colors to add shadows to everything else as well, or highlights with the white. So that way we're not introducing totally new colors. So let me show you what I've done. In a perfect world, if the other video went well, all right, I'm going to give this a base coat. Right up here, this is my white. We don't have to put it on heavy because it's a white background as well. But even with the other colors, you'll see having a little bit of the white show through will, you know, again, make everything cohesive. All right, so we got a little base coat, brushing with our supposed grain. I'm going to dip this brush a little bit in the gray, a little bit in the tan, and we're going to just add some details, maybe flip my brush a couple times. Okay, maybe a little more tan because it doesn't seem like it's coming through as well. All right, and then with our white, because that kind of, it's just a small piece, I kind of went a little hog wild with the colors, with our shadowing. All right. All right, there we go. It's white, but it has shadow, if that makes any sense. You don't have to worry about where you're putting the shadow colors so much as that you blend them out really well. If you work wet paint with wet paint, it will work and it will look beautiful. All right, let's see. Let's do this one here. This one we can go a little bit crazier. Okay. Oh, it moved off of our line here, so let's see. There we go. See, I'm not being too cautious here. This isn't rocket science. This is paint, you guys. And the nice thing about these stamps is that they don't make it perfectly solid lines. So if you'll see when we're stamping, and see where I've marked, you can't see it in the video because you're too far away, but where I've marked my white there, the W, and any little lines that might have shown with our watercolor pencil, the water-based paint is just, it's muting those colors, right? Oh, kind of went off of the tape there a little bit, getting a little hog wild with myself. Getting a little crazy. All right, push down our our tape. Get a base coat of our white. I know that we already have white on the walls. We're starting to add a shadow, all right? White, even though it's white, you look at the woods, there's shadows to it when you look at it, okay? We're adding that because there is no depth in this, okay? We're adding a variant in the wood. It's a little, you know, ripply or whatever. And as long as you're working wet on wet with your paint, you can always use like a wet rag. You could spray it with some water if you want, but it doesn't hurt to add a little more of that base white. So there. So this piece has its shadows. That has its shadows. I have a few more to add with the white shadows and then we'll go on to the next color. All right, so we already have most of this section done up here with our aqua. Our tape is kind of going by the wayside here. This is on purpose. I'm just reusing my tape. So this, you know, there's strands here or there. Some of it's on purpose. Some of it's falling off like over here. So we've got just, these are all leftover paints, by the way. These happen to all be latex. So would I blend chalk paints in latex? I've done it before. It's a water-based paint. This whole thing's gonna get sealed anyways, just because. It'll give a little more durability. So I have a little base coat, I have a little gray, a little tan. All right, and blend it. A little white for a little highlight. Again, so you see that they're all the same colors. Everything's gonna really go nicely together. It's all gonna blend nicely together. And it's gonna all be copacetic, okay? That's what we want. And then a little more shadow there. There. That's gonna be a nice start to our planking. The stamps will add all the grains. That's gonna give you all the deep grooves. But even within the planks of wood, remember, they do have little highs and lows. The wood is not absolutely perfect. All right, do a little bit more and we'll work on our next color. Wet on wet. And trust me, when you see this all done, it's gonna make sense. Don't freak out. If you don't know what colors to use, search the internet and find something that you like and get similar colors. You don't have to be a wizard at knowing what colors go together. If you see a picture and you like the colors together and it pleases you, That's all you need to know. All right, just real quick, we're going to add the few bits of green. I already did one here. Again, we've already moved our tape, and it's just leftover paint that we have. This is actually a Valspar sample. So our next one is actually this long run here. And again, we're going to work wet on wet. And get some of the base on. And again, it doesn't have to cover all the way because we're going to be adding highlights of that white anyways. So, and what I have done is I've gone through, if you've noticed, maybe some of the white has gotten a little bit lighter because as the paint dried, it was a little heavy-handed with the gray and the tan. So all I did is kind of brushed over with the white again just to get it to a plank that looks like it was white, that just has a little shadowing. Okay, so this paint is getting old and it's thick, so I don't want to do the whole section. It'll dry too fast. And again, we want to work this shadowing and highlights wet on wet. So we've got that. Then we get our palette of our highlights and shadows, the gray, the tan, and looks like more of the gray came out there. And a little more of the tan maybe. And then we'll add a little bit of white. There's no rhyme or reason. Just as long as you're following the green, you can go back and fix things. You can add more of the green if it's too much color. It's very easy. It's carefree. I know you don't believe me, but it really is. And just gonna blend it while everything is still wet, and we can blend it so we don't get those streakies. It also is actually really nice to do this with the chip brushes because you get a lot finer lines with the shadowing. But I didn't bring it home and we made it work. We don't worry about that stuff. All right, so you can play with what you like. Again, you can thin the color, the shadow and the highlights down to give you a little more ease if you're afraid to do it real dark. You can also spray the base coat to give it a little more workability. All right, and I'm going to keep working this. You've seen me do the aqua and everything else. This isn't anything new. I'm just showing you the next color. So we're in the final stretch with the tan. I kind of did it backwards this time. I'm going to do the last strip because I wanted to play with this. I'm too lazy to mix a special color because technically this is not a latex, and so I don't want to mix it with a latex, but we're going to blend it, and it's been working out well. So I have watered this down. Instead of, again, mixing a light tan, I'm putting it on very watery, very haphazardly. Let some of that base coat come through. But if you have a latex or even a chalk paint that'll play very nice, I've used latex or acrylics even to kind of tint my chalk paint. So they do play well with each other. I wouldn't do it on a large scale. But in this particular case, I'm just making this tan by making it very see-through. Otherwise, I think it'll be too dark. And I'm just going to scrub out the T for tan that's in the background there. Because it's the watercolor pencil, I can do that. All right, and while it's still wet, I'm going to scratch out this end. Okay, while that's still wet, we're going to add a little bit of our, remember we're going to use the same colors. We're going to use, we don't need to use the tan so much, but we're going to use the gray and the white. We can make some of the tan areas darker. Some of the strips will be a darker tan, some will be a lighter tan. All right. And that's how this is going to roll. Again, easy, easy. If I were you, I would mix a light tan, but I'm doing it this way for the purposes of what I just explained. It's the same process. We have highlights, we have shadows. We can add some more of the straight out tan to kind of give that a deeper color. Blend out some of these other colors. All right, so we've got a lot more done, and I just wanted to show you what I did with the grays. I'm going to try not to spill it. What I have is I took the base coat, our white, I put a lot of white and a little bit of white, and then I added more gray and less gray and more gray. So I'm not mixing it totally because it can go on sort of variegated. I'm not worried about that. And then I actually picked out another tan to really kind of set off. This one isn't as tan as I'm looking at it the next day in the sunlight. I'm bringing one on that has more of a creamy tone to it. We're going to go to time lapse so you don't have to step through everything, but everything's going to be the same. We're going to be base coating our light gray, dark gray, light gray. We're going to use our same 3 colors for shadowing and highlighting. And we'll see you at the next, well, a couple other clips. And we'll start our stamping. All right, we've got the whole wall planked, and we're just gonna start to do our stamping. Again, we're using the Barnwood plank stamp from Iron Orchid Designs. We are an authorized retailer, as well as Dixie, Belle, Bells and Whistles, and Silk Mineral Paint, just to put that out there. And we're gonna start, like I said, there's a bunch of different patterns, and I explained in the beginning of the video, you want to, these come in 2 full sheets. We condition them by sanding them and cleaning them. Then I cut them with the backing still on them. And we have all these different parts and stuff that we're going to use, knots and joints and things like that. But this is the most important one. This is what we're starting with today. It's not very attractive because I've used this so many times on different furniture or in my walls at the shop. But it gives us the top and bottom seams, like I've said before. So what I want to show you is you can do this any number of ways. I could use a paint, and I would probably thin it down if it was an acrylic or a latex, or chalk, especially chalk paint, because it dries so fast. I would thin it with a little bit of water. But you're going to want to watch your consistency. I'm using Iron Orchid Designs ink. You can see it's a well-loved. I'm actually towards the bottom of this, so I have a spare bottle just in case. And you can put this in like a little palette. I could squeeze this in here and use a brayer. There's many ways we can do this, okay? Like if we're rolling walls with the paint roller. I'm going to use the Iron Orchid Design stamp pad. This is already one that has the ink in it, but I'm just going to freshen it up. I do prefer to use ink because it gives you a nice crisp thin surface, and I'm not afraid to, if I made a mistake, how to fix it. You're going to want to have, in case you do make a mistake, a little bit of rubbing alcohol handy. We'll get to that in the next step. I just want to show you my process before I stamp because we're going to move the camera. All right, and then I take, oh, I should have had a little popsicle stick to kind of make this even, especially if it was a new pad, but this is already a pretty well used pad. I'm not too concerned about it being too even because it's pretty well soaked. Then again, there's a couple ways you can apply this. I could take just this pad and just tap the stamp with the pad, all right? What I like to do, again, is I use that brayer. You could use it on a paper plate, some sort of palette. And I'm going to, this is actually really juicy. This is great for fabric. But I'm going to be careful with this because it's really juicy. Because stone gray ink actually tends to seems to be very translucent, and I can definitely see we have ink on here. So let me make sure it's my stone gray. Yes, it's my stone gray. And we'll get to the next step after I adjust the camera. All right, you guys, I've already got some stamping here because the magic of doing these videos in a small operation, the first time I didn't have the camera high enough, and then the second time for some reason I hit time lapse. So you didn't hear any of the important information I was telling you on the video. So we had to ink-snay those, and so now we have pretty much our top rows already done. But at least I saved some here so I can explain what we did. If this was all the same color wall, like if you see our stage pictures and our photos for social media, even some of the pictures that you'll see of the projects on these videos, the barnwood, that shiplap sort of looking wall that you see in a lot of those shots, was basically the same technique what we did with just the white planking. All right, we used the base coat and we blended in really watery gray and tan horizontally just to start a shadow movement in the wood. Now, at this stage of the game, if that was a single color wall like we did, if it was just a white, if it was just a gray, whatever, the most important thing you're going to want to do is give yourself a level line before you start stamping. All right, and like I said, we're using this one stamp. It's very important. It has our top and bottom seams. We're only going to be inking or painting one of them at a time. We're going to use the other one as our measurement. So let's say like here, you'll see I have the ink down here, but it's not up here because I use that as a measurement. Okay, well, it's this way. Our cross grains, okay, they go this way, and if I flip it, they go this way. And I will flip them between planks sometimes, not always. If it's always flipped, then it's too predictable. So nature is very unpredictable, it's very erratic, and that's what you want to replicate. When someone's putting up the shiplap on your walls or on your furniture, they're not looking at how the cross grains are going, they're just putting the wood down. So we're not going to do a lot of cross graining. Some planks will have more cross graining than others. The ones that have less cross grain, I am going to do more of the other grains. Some might not have hardly any grain showing. Look at your wood floors at home or wherever, and you'll see the difference. Some have different grain going, some have less, some have more, some are lighter, some are darker. So that's what we want to replicate. And so I'm going to show you, again, we have my brayer and my ink pad. I just rolled my brayer across the top of my ink pad. How you ink up your stamps, I showed you, is up to you. And let's do our top row, because this one's kind of important because we're limited with our ceiling. We're not going to be able to go all the way up. So this plank is all the same, so we want to make sure that our cross grain is the same. So that's what we're doing. So this is our bottom line, our bottom seam. And I'm really only trying to concentrate my paint or my ink on this bottom seam right now. All right, I might add just a little bit here, maybe a little bit there of ink. The other time I stamped it, I did more. This is going to have less. All right, we're going to match our bottom seam. And then this part, we're going to match it to our already taped wall. All right, and then without the stamp moving, this is the tricky part. Because once you're down with your stamp, you don't want it to move. So I'm going to go as high up and pressing as I can. I'm not going to worry about pressing everything very evenly because I want that cross grain to be random. And then I'm going to carefully lift it away. Now see, it ends all right here. We can try adding a little bit towards the top by adding just a little bit of ink, all right, to just the top. I'm going to wipe the ink off of the bottom because as I'm trying to set down the ink on the top, if the bottom rests, I'll be getting the ink or the paint on parts that I don't want to. So let's try getting this way up there and just give it some lines. All right, let's just do that here too. Okay, where it doesn't meet and I want it to add more, I can do that later. I'm going to show you at the end of all these steps how we're going to fix how, like, we can't get the stamp all the way into the doorbell. We're going to show you how we can take a fine little brush and we're going to make everything seem cohesive. Not that we won't have any missing lines at the inside corners or where the molding meets and things like that. So let me do one more stamp with this important one. And again, let me line up. I have the cross grains going this way. So this is my bottom. And if you're more comfortable, if you're just afraid, you don't have to be as conscientious of these varying cross grains. This is just me going the extra mile. This will look fabulous if you just putting it up there, all right? But I'm hoping I'm explaining this to make sense. Nature is very unpredictable. It's irregular. There's no patterns. And so we don't want that. We don't want this to appear too predictable. All right. And so now we have a lot less cross grains, which is great. I might see if we can add a little more ink here. There we go. All right, let's add some more to this. This was going this way now, so let's wipe off our ink. These wipies are very handy for working on the spot. Again, if we were doing a section of this, especially if you were using paint, the paint will want to start drying, especially if you're using a chalk style paint, even you water it down and all that. And it starts getting gunky on your stamp. So you're going to want to take a break, clean it with the warm soapy water, your brayer as well. While those are drying, get another brayer or pad, ink pad, and start working some of the other grains. We're going to be doing that in the next steps. But for now, because I'm working with ink, it's going to give me a lot more work time. And we're only doing a small section of wall. I'm going to do all of this all at once. So this goes this way. So that's our bottom. And normally I wouldn't do this on my wall or my surface that I'm working on, but okay. All right. And then let's do, this one's the same direction, this other plank. Get that out of the way. And just maybe a little bit at the end. Leave our space between this cross graining and the end. If you don't want to have messy hands, whether it's ink or paint, wear gloves, because I don't know if you can see in the video, I'm getting all messy. But this is what I do, playing in my sandbox. All right, so I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to alternate my cross grain one direction and the other direction. I'm, again, only doing the one line of ink and using the top as a measure. This row is actually off a hair, but that's okay. I'd rather it be skinnier than too wide, because then our other grains won't fit very well. But I'm good with this. All right, we're going to see you at the next step. So we're going to start. I'm hoping this shows up in video. I'm just putting ink on my brayer, and then I'm going to rub it onto the stamp. You want a flat surface. These are a little more, these stamps are a little more flexible, but some stamps, if it's not real flat, you're going to end up having to use your wipey to wipe off the excess that hits the back part of your stamp. But you'll see when you're going along if you have some straight edges or blobs from your ink hitting the wrong part of your stamp. So we want to vary where we're putting the heavy ones. We have the heavy pattern there, we have the busy pattern there. Let's do this dark one here in the heavier pattern. All right, so this one here is very particularly interesting because it has this little corner piece. If you do it the right way, it makes a nice ring for your knot. So we're going to start. You can do it at the bottom. I did that here. I don't know if it shows. I'm going to show you how we can totally make this a really neat centered knot. If you're not comfortable with doing the stamps, leave the one area without ink or paint. But we're going to fudge it. We're going to just put it down. Oh wait, we're going to do it in the middle. All right, and we're not going to put pressure onto where the other pretend boards are. All right, so, and then we lift it up, and then we flip it over. Oh wait, we didn't get it over, so let's see. I don't think we got it over enough there. Or I didn't ink it over there. And then we flip it like so. All right, and we're going to have a nice ring set up for a knot. Again, we don't want to put pressure where this other board is. And we have that a little bit went over, but when we add some grain, you're not going to notice it. You just don't want to go too heavy on that. And then we're just going to take the other parts of this graining and fill in the board. We're going to stay away from that knot. Unless you have a long board, you can add another knot, but this is a short board, pretend board. And again, we're just going to put the pressure where we want the stamp to go. And it doesn't have to be even. And if you want, you can do multiple textures. We don't always, but I could go over this. Actually, I'm not going to do it with this one. Some of the other ones, I added some of this graining along with the big grain. But this busy one, I'm going to leave this board alone. This one to me is done except for adding the knot. But we can add the busy graining to, I love doing it to the white, but I'm not going to do it because I did it with the other white. So this one's going to be different. We're going to add the busy graining to the gray. It's a very fine line, but it's very busy. A lot of real fine, busy lines. But it's very important oak grain. And again, you could add it to this, but I've already done it to the other ones, and I don't want to have it be too repetitive. And that. And just keep going. We can flip it. add some more ink and we'll flip it. All right, there we go. And let's see, what will we do with this board? We will take this open green, I call it straight green, and we'll go down this board with it. We can flip it like that. Randomize how dark these go on. All right, so now we have one of those boards that has a lot of those straight grains. And then to be interesting, I like using this one. It adds a nice little kind of a compact texture. It's really nice to use on the edges because sometimes, you know, when you're ripping the boards on the mill saws, you know, sometimes things get, you know, a little roughed up on the edges. So we can do that. We can add some roughness to the edges. Plus, if you have a weak part of your seam line, adding this areas where it's darker can kind of bolster those seam lines. All right, let's keep going this way and then go lighter again. And that would be my husband. I try to tell him to be quiet. All right, so we can keep doing that if we want. I like using this on the edges of the boards as well. Like if I was going to come around the corner, tape a seam down and continue my planks to make it look like it had that 2-inch depth or 1-inch depth. You could do that with this. It gives you the straight lines. Or you could use this one. All right, you can do it like that, right down your tape seam, and it gives you that open edge, that sawed edge. I did that at the store. If you're ever in the area, you can come take a look at how I did that edge. All right, so that board is done. This board only has the cross grain. Let's just add some of this texture and it'll be done. Not everything has to have all the graining. We'll just do some on the edge. All right, a little bit there. And this is done as well. See how it happens so fast? It really does. It happens so fast. So I want to keep randomizing my patterns. I don't want to go too much, you know, all bunch of heavy graining. I want to mix it up, the light graining, add some heavy graining. I don't want to always do heavy graining on the dark gray. I want everything to be very random and very organic. What I'm going to show you is we have these other little parts to the stamps. There are two end joints and then there are two knots. So I'm going to pick a knot. I really like this one. It's got the real fine cracks in it, and then this one's a very big, more like a pine knot. This one seems to be more of a, I don't know, I feel like it's more of a oak. But, you know, who am I? Let's see. Here's our knot that we made with that stamp, and we're going to add that center to make it official, a knot in the center. All right, we can do it a little bit here too if we want. All right, and that's done. Let's add a joint. All right, I'm really being daring. And that was my husband walking by. Because I'm pretty sure that showed up on the side of the camera. Let's see. There we go. And we can use the other knot. Next time we use them, we might flip them around. This one has more texture to it, so you can say like the, where they rip the, where they cut for the length, you know, sometimes it splits, so it gives you more texture. That's what this one is. You have like the little nail heads. All right, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna flip this around for this one. It happens super fast. Let's see, right? This way. Easy peasy. I'm going to keep doing my wall, and we'll see you at the other end. All right, so we're in the nitty-gritty here, and I started adding some details along. We've continued the seam lines to the end. We've added some grains, and I'm going to show you what I did. I have the cap from our rubbing alcohol. I'm just going to add another drop to my cap. It's just going to contain the alcohol. If you're using paint, you're going to want to have a little bit of water as your medium. But since we're using the inks, the Iron Orchid Design inks, all right, this is what we're looking for, is the alcohol. Rubbing alcohol, you have it probably underneath in your bathroom sink. And I've made a little palette with my ink. I have my alcohol for my flow, and I'm just going to get it as thick or as thin as I need it. I'm also boosting a little bit of our seam lines. Like I've already added a little bit of like the straight out ink to this joint here. And what I can do is I can take some of that, you know, dark ink and kind of flow it into the board a little bit. We can boost some of the depth of our boards at the, you know, the top and the bottom, these seams. Give it a little extra blackness, a real fine line. Use a natural bristle brush when you're using like alcohol is probably best. And then like where these little nail heads are, if you want to go the extra mile, add a little, you know, kind of a depth to the bottom of them. All right. And it's nothing that's going to be like earth-shattering, like, oh my gosh, what a difference that made here. It's going to be in the overall appearance. We're just going to very subtly fool the eye. All right, let me show you. We're going to make this a little bit thinner, so it's a little more transparent. It's more gray than it is a dark gray, because I'd rather go lighter than start this out darker. We have a little bit of grains here. Let's continue it right to the edge. All right. We can get a hair more color in there. Right there. Just so that this edge isn't just have no interest where the rest of the, you know, the project does. All right, and then this has a lot of fine grain because we use that edge piece that has a lot of the details. So we'll just add there. And again, Let's add a little bit to our seam. And it doesn't have to go all the way down the seam line. We're just gonna pick some spots where we're gonna give it a little more depth. And we do this for all our sides where it meets the molding, maybe the bottom edge where it meets your base molding. If you get a little mistake and you need to wipe it off, I don't have a rag handy, but I'm just going to use my finger, and you can wipe off with alcohol. It's the same thing with the stamps. If you made a mistake with your stamps, have a little rag with the alcohol, and you can erase your mistakes as long as you work fast. You got to work fast. So you lift up your stamp and you say, oh, like I actually did a few times where I missed my seam line. It was off kilter. So I just, as soon as I took the stamp off, I saw my mistake. I had my rag ready, hit it with some alcohol, and the alcohol broke down the ink right away. But once that ink sets a minute, you know, it's not gonna want to come off very easily. And then you can always just re-hit it with your base color. All right, so I'm going to keep doing this to our project. Even at the top where, you know, it meets the ceiling, we'll just continue some of the cross grain lines like this. Right? Maybe dot some of it. Bring this over. Some graining here. Just so that you don't have this whole line at your edge that doesn't match the rest. And it's just going to happen real fast. We're going to let that dry, you know, a good hour or so, let that ink really set in there. And then the next step, I'm going to actually hit this with some flat varnish. Because I have different paints and they have different sheens, the flat varnish, I won't give this too much of a sheen. It'll protect the wall a little bit because the 110 was a mineral style paint, and it'll give everything an even effect. All right, we'll see you at the next clip. Here it is, you guys, it's all done. We're gonna get some nice stills and put it at the end of the video, but I hope you can see all the beautiful details. Just adding the highlights and the shadows in our pre-stamping stage adds so much detail. The stamps add so much detail, and then adding just a hair darker just to make some of these lines actually have some more depth to them. I had so much fun doing this. I hope I didn't scare you away. I think I explained just how easy this is. Yes, there's a few steps, but really you can have this beautiful wall with really little to no effort. It's easy peasy. If you have any questions, you know, right down below, please post any questions. Please, if you like what you see here, subscribe to us, like this post. Also, you can follow us on other social media platforms. Here on YouTube, it is Seaporium Shop and Makery, but all the other social platforms, it's like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok /Seaporium. Easy. If you're interested in any of the Dixie, Belle, or Iron Orchid design products, or if you want to see what we offer online for locally made goods, please check us out at Seaporium.com. And there's also information there on learning how to use these stamps, transfers, molds, so much good information there for you. I appreciate you spending some time. We really do appreciate you. And until we see you next time, stay well, stay sassy. Bye-bye.